Hello, everyone out there in Radio Land. It is once again that time of the week. What time of the week is it? Well, it's that time of the week where we dig underneath the headlines. We call out the establishment on its BS. We talk about the real news, the real truth, internationally, nationally, and at the state and local level. And again, basically, dig up all those truths that the mainstream corporate media does not want you to think about, discuss, or analyze in a real in-depth way. It is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 FM WIDR Kalamazoo or Western Michigan University, no matter how dope or insightful they may happen to be. Joined today by my co-host Lawrence, who's getting his stuff all plugged in right now.
Yo, what up?
Yep.
What up, though?
First of all, I want to say a big sorry to missing the show last week, but a big thanks to our co-host Ryan, who stepped up and hosted the proceedings while I was gone.
I still need to do that. I still need to get my certification and stuff so that when we're not here or when somebody's not here, I can come and step in.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
I haven't done that yet.
Yep. Get it done. I mean, that's a rough thing. We're both working class folks, so it's like hard to get trained up on this stuff. So I'll go right into it and talk a little bit about why I was gone, and then we'll talk a little bit about the debates. I know usually we try to start with a local thing, but I think this kind of segues all pretty nicely. So
that we've had there was a lot of craziness, man, from the mass shootings to the other insanity that's going on in China right now with the protests. With there's a lot of news that we got to get to, and we ain't got enough time.
So let's jump right in. So the big reason I wasn't here last week, and we're going to talk about the debates, but it had to do with the debates. So I not to toot my own horn, but I wanted to tell a little story about it. I was with Movimiento Cosecha, and me and a bunch of Detroiters organized several actions. We did some civil disobedience over on Jefferson Avenue, the road leading into Canada. We blockaded the street for about 12 minutes. And just, here's an interesting thing. And I want just interesting. Anybody is, could, if you are potentially planning a similar action, not that you would or you should, wink, wink. It's important information. So we got arrested and we got taken down to Wayne County. And apparently, because the Detroit police were so swamped with security for the debates and a myriad of other factors, the attorney told us this, that Wayne County was very understaffed. The cops literally gave us all tickets, dates to reappear in court, but we actually got out so soon that we were able to go back to the Cosecha debate watch party, and we were all there cheering when our comrade called out Biden on the President Obama's poor immigration record, i.e. 3 million deportations. And I really wanted to hone in on that because I think that's the power of, those kind of actions and disruptions, because for the next, I'd say 15 or 20 minutes, Lawrence, the rest of the candidates decided to dogpile on Joe Biden about the record of his administration on immigration. So it really shows that small actions can really tilt the needle and really pivot the discussion in really important ways. And that wasn't even the only disruption that night.
Tamika Mallory and my son and I forgot the pastor's name. Well, some of the leaders of the Women's March and other activists protested Bill de Blasio for not firing the police officer that killed Eric Gardner, that murdered Eric Gardner. And before we go any further, because I know that we need to talk about this, I just want to say rest in peace to Tammy Morrison. She passed away earlier from complications of pneumonia. Fantastic and amazing, a legendary author and writer and poet, and just all around amazing outstanding person. If you have not seen her interview with Dr. Cornel West or her on Democracy Now! Or someone or have ever read or watched any of her books or things that were adaptations of her books, please do so. Please do so.
And if I could just say one thing about Toni Morrison too, one of the things I always tell people, especially white activists and organizers, like theory is important, but make sure, I spent a few years in college doing this, like really dove into, the history of Black American lit, and in order to building those cross-cultural bridges, reading stuff by people like Toni Morrison, Mary Baraka, Gil Scott-Heron, and so on and so forth. That is really important. That's going to broaden your worldview, and I think it should be like a bare minimum for all of us as a society. But if you want to deprogram some of your toxic whiteness, it's a good place to start.
Doc, read some Fannie Lou Haman and some some Gil Scott-Heron and some there's a million others that we can talk about. But I also was not here because I was also in Detroit.
Yep.
To get back on topic, I was also in Detroit. I was with my homie Samad. His mom, we was at a rally. His mother, for those who not know, is in sanctuary here in Kalamazoo. She's been in sanctuary for, I think, over 13 years.
And specifically kept up at the church for about a year and a half now.
Yeah. She's been there for a year and a half. His dad got deported when he was young. He's a DACA recipient. I was at a rally with him. He ended up getting on CNN. He was at a rally. We was with Rashida Tlaib. Rashida Tlaib was there at the rally, and that was super fire. You know what I'm saying? So I was all in Detroit with them. Got to kick it, meet them, and got to see the mainstream media cover the debates. Got to see the mainstream media on CNN cover up the Bernie Sanders supporters. So if you saw, especially if you was watching CNN, you would see in the background a bunch of supporters, Elizabeth Warren supporters, Biden supporters, all these different signs. The Bernie supporters were behind the CNN sign, and they forced them to be behind the CNN sign. Yeah. They didn't let the Bernie supporters get in the back of where the camera would see them. They literally put the Bernie supporters behind the CNN sign, so when the camera panned to them, you couldn't see them. Like
CNN's all like, don't look at the massive progressive voter base behind the curtain.
Like, dog, man, for real. Like, I saw it, man. I was sitting here like, and also, our former governor was on CNN at the time, and like it was crazy.
Granholm, or?
Yeah, Granholm. Granholm was on. There was a open, like, basically there was a camera, and they had their own sound stage, but the back was open so you could see the crowd and stuff. And like, I was one of the people, me and a couple of people was there. We saw it, man. I was sitting there like, it was crazy. Like, it was crazy. I didn't stay there for the debates because I didn't have no money. I ain't gonna lie to you. I was broke. I didn't have no money.
Yep.
I had no money to go and watch the debate. Right. We drove back home so I could go to a watch party. I went to a watch party with a couple of friends. But yeah, the debates. The debates.
Yeah. They're pretty spicy this round.
Bruh. No, the first night was spicy. Yeah. The second night was a little bland, but the second night had some fireworks, and we definitely need to talk about all the smoke.
Mm-hmm. I think the first night, it was a very sad day. Just seeing all of those centrists demolished. Oh man. I mean, basically what you had, a bunch of no-name candidates running like on a capital C corporate Democrat platform versus like the two progressive powerhouses of the Democratic Party. It was a slaughter.
Doc, it was what it was. As one of my friends said, that first night was watching two grandmaster martial artists stand back to back, whooping everybody else's ass. Like, everybody who wanted to smoke with them got smoked. They got it, and they didn't want it. And then you even had Marianne Williamson, like, speak truth to power when it came to reparations. She had some really strong moments herself when it came to talking about some issues, and I really appreciated it.
If you just know her as the Orb Lady, there is actually some depth there, and I really do appreciate too, like, her whole kind of talking about, like, there is like a pathology and a psychology behind the rise of Trump that the Democrats don't really talk about very often.
Like, and also, I'm not gonna lie, I gotta also take away some credit, because after the debate, she came out for Medicare for all. But before the debate, she was actually for a public option when she went on Colbert. She said she was for a public option. But after the debate, she said she got convinced that we should have Medicare for all. And I'm like, before your interview with Colbert, you signed the progressive pledge that the TYT put out, saying that you would fight for Medicare for all. So now you flip-flopping like Marianne. Marianne. Like, and that's what I was having an issue with Marianne, outside of some of her problematic history and things of that nature. But yeah, that first night, there's no question. Like, in my opinion, on both nights, the biggest winners of both nights was Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren.
It's funny because, like, CNN stacked the whole thing against them. It was all like a referendum on their policies and try and tear down progressive policies. And like DJ Khaled said, you played yourself. That's
But the main, I mean, outside of the super garbage questions that they were getting, like, should America be allowed to nuke someone first?
Oh my God!
Like I was sitting there like, Jake Tapper, what did you just say? Like, I was like, Jake, what? Did you just argue that America should nuke a country that did not attack us first?
Man, the Democrats have come a long way from the party of, like, Kennedy and George McGovern. Man.
No, but that's my point. I was sitting here like, I know this Negro didn't just say that. Like, I shouldn't say Negro because he ain't no Negro. But I'm just sitting there like, I know this fool didn't just say. Or the premise is that another country would nuke America. Okay. Let us pretend that there is another country that has nuclear weapons, like Russia or China, Israel, or somewhere else that has that.
North Korea gets brought up a lot.
Right, North Korea. You honestly believe, after what we have done to North Korea in the past, that North Korea would offensively attack us first? Do you honestly believe that?
Yeah.
After all the peace stuff that's been going on with North Korea and South Korea, after Trump been the first president to walk in North Korea, do you honestly believe that North Korea is going to be like, you know what, screw all this, we're just going to nuke America? Are you kidding me?
And I think, it's important, like, they obviously aren't going to talk about the geopolitical context of nuclear weapons, but, like, North Korea is a good example because, and, look, again, I'm not going to, very, very critical towards North Korea, but their logic for having nukes is actually pretty pragmatic because they have seen what happens to nations that dismantle their nuclear programs, I'm thinking like Libya, etc., and later on get invaded and destroyed by the United States.
Also, we obliterated their population the last time we got into a war with North Korea. We destroyed 20% of their, I think, what was it, 25% of their population?
Yeah. And there was literally, I think was it Eisenhower or MacArthur, I think, said, like, there's literally no structures left to bomb, like, something like that.
That was with us not using nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
Right, let's think about it. That was us not using nuclear weapons. So that premise, that question by itself was absolutely 100% garbage. The other thing that was absolutely 100% garbage was everything after that. Hey, the theater of getting them to fight each other. Hey Warren, you don't like Bernie. Bernie likes this. You say that Bernie says he's a democratic socialist. You say you're a capitalist. What's wrong with being a socialist? Why don't you call yourself socialist? Do you hate Bernie Sanders? No, I don't hate Bernie Sanders. We actually agree on a lot of policy. Thank you for your 30 seconds. Hey Bernie, Delaney says that Medicare for all sucks and that you suck too. Will you attack him now?
Yeah,
no, I'm not going to attack him because my policy is better. I'm talking about policy. Hey John Delaney, will you attack Bernie Sanders? Oh yes, I will attack Bernie Sanders because I have nothing else to talk about.
Yes,
that was literally. That was the first debate and second debate. Hey, some of your colleagues are fighting for Medicare for all. Who on this stage is actually fighting for Medicare for all? And shout out to Kirsten Gillibrand, Tulsi Gabbard, Bill de Blasio. They actually was fighting for Medicare for all. Like,
I think there's like somebody in the CNN control room that's like, oh, viewers are going down. Can you ask Kamala Harris to drag Joe Biden again?
No. But when Tulsi went out there, Kamala.
Oh yeah, oof.
A few different times, and it was body bag, just straight body bag. Like when it came, and the thing that pissed me off the most after the debates was the media's reaction to Tulsi, because they didn't want to talk about the fact that Tulsi dragged Kamala because of her record, her prosecutional record is horrible.
Yeah, I think, and like, also even the most sympathetic, I will say there is some good things in Kamala's record, but it is a mixed bag.
No.
Some bad things.
There are one or two good things, but the overwhelming majority of the time, the premise that they are pushing that she was a progressive prosecutor is a lie. It is a lie. Tulsi exposed that. When it came to Medicare for all, Kirsten Gillibrand and Tulsi exposed that and Bill de Blasio, to his credit, keeping the private insurance industry involved in crafting the legislation of healthcare keeps the problem that we have today. So no, it's not Medicare for all. No, it's not even close. You're doing a glorified public option where the health insurance industry will still screw over millions of Americans. And also, Bill de Blasio, I gotta call you out too. You were lying when you said that the federal government told you not to fire the police officer. That was not the federal government's jurisdiction to fire that police officer. That was you.
That's
you
right.
chose to not fire him, his boss's bosses, for something that we can clearly see is an illegal chokehold. You chose to stick with the police unions that killed one of your citizens. So that was a lie.
Yep.
That was a complete lie. I'm gonna need for you to slap yourself twice.
That's the problem with de Blasio is, he's very he pivots himself as a progressive, which in comparison to the previous New York mayor, yes, but when push really comes to shove on the very hard issues, he's going to choose the path of least resistance.
And honestly, I think Bill de Blasio has some good, and honestly, I do think Bill de Blasio has some good progressive policies. He also supports the Progressive Pledge. If you watch things like the Young Turks and you saw him sign, he actually literally signed the Progressive Pledge and he supports it. For those who do not know what the Progressive Pledge is, there is hold on a second. There's a petition, I'm saying the word wrong, going on online that basically says if you're going to call yourself progressive, you must fight for these economic things. You need to fight to get money out of politics by getting a constitutional amendment to get money out of politics. You must fight for Medicare for all. You must fight for free college and tuition. You must fight for a living wage of $15 an hour, a living wage, and you must fight for the Green New Deal, the actual Green New Deal, getting us off of fossil fuels in 12 years, so that the planet doesn't burn to smithereens. So when it comes to Bill de Blasio, he supports that. He says that he will fight for those things. He supports those things. He signed on to it. Mike Gravel signed on to it. Bernie Sanders did. So did Marianne Williamson. So did Elizabeth Warren. So you got to give these people credit, because the people who are claiming that they're progressives, a lot of them not only have been standing on it, they've been fighting for it, which also makes the argument or the thing with Kamala Harris that much more devastating, because when they pointed out, Kamala, your healthcare plan was written by someone who works for Medicaid expansion. Your healthcare plan literally is written by the people who will profit from your plan. That will that till this day locks out millions of Americans from getting affordable, decent healthcare. And also, Kamala's plan.
Oh, okay. I've seen the memes about this.
No, that's the thing. Kamala's plan takes 10 years to get done. So, in a best case scenario, this is the best case scenario. She will get elected twice, and then we're gonna get another president to fully implement her bill.
Which again is, well, here's the problem. I think it's not a bad bill on its own, but when you have opponent, well, I'd say if you break it down, it is way too specific. That is a fundamental problem. I think the main reason is when you're running against people who have really ambitious plans on how to deal with student debts, and to have the mechanisms to back them up, this is how we would actually do this, and you propose something like that is targets a very specific population that has with several stipulations, then it's bad political timing. You do not drop a plan like that when your opponents are talking about canceling student loan debt. Yeah?
No. But I'm talking about Medicare for all. But at the same time,
I'm sorry.
No. I was talking about Medicare for all. But her student loan debt thing is also abysmal, and I can get into that too. But that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah. Biden got bodied, but Biden also, just to sum it up, Biden also threw some body blows, talking about how Cory Booker was supported stop and frisk, and he hired Rudy Giuliani's dude to help run the police force. That was a body blow, but Cory punched back by saying, "Doc, I've been working on bills and reforms to fix all the crap that you were pushing."
Yeah.
That was a good exchange. Biden was getting bodied. Kamala got bodied. John Delaney and Hickenlooper both got bodied.
Yeah.
They got bodied. they got bodied by Bernie and Warren, and Bernie and Warren was just like, what's wrong with the whole John Delaney going after Warren, and Warren saying, "Look, I don't know why you're running for president to tell everybody what you're not gonna do." Yeah. And then Bernie snapping back at people like, "How y'all gonna tell me what Medicare for all is gonna do when I wrote the bill telling y'all what it will do?"
I think the second debate really showed me what I really liked about it is they all kind of exposed each other. It was all of y'all are living in some glass houses throwing stones. I think Tulsi's the only one who really came out unscathed. They came back at her with this was not even at the debate, but Assad.
After the debate, everybody was smearing Tulsi.
Yeah. She did diplomacy and talked to Assad. Oh,
that's the thing. That's how you know they don't have anything substantive to actually say against Tulsi.
Yeah.
You can't question her valor, because she was a former veteran, and she's not for intervention. She's not for regime change intervention wars. So on foreign policy, you can't mess with her. She supports Medicare for all. It's a better system than the system that we have, and it's a better system than arguing for the half-ass systems of a public option or these other pragmatic quote-unquote policies that won't get us to where we need to be. So you can't argue there. You can't argue against her when it comes to her wanting to put more money into infrastructure and fighting for climate change.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna say if you're gonna argue with her about reparations, or if you're gonna argue with her about universal basic income or universal housing or some other policies, all right.
They actually did try to. There was a gotcha question posed to her about the Green New Deal. And it was kind of a smear, but like the reason she didn't sign on the Green New Deal is like she put forward her own plan that was actually more ambitious and had to have more concrete targets. I wanted to also kind of bring back to the immigration subject. So, as I mentioned earlier in the program, there was a Kosecha activist who disrupted and shouted 3 million deportations. And that caused the next 10 minutes or so of the debate to be a referendum on, Joe Biden and also the immigration record under Obama. And here's what I think.
Julio Castro, who was the HUD secretary at that time.
Yeah, that's right.
You can't forget about that.
So, what I thought was really important with that is it's the first time I've seen in these Democratic debates that the Obama administration is sacrosanct. Do not criticize what they did, especially in the era of Trump. But, Cory Booker, to his credit, it's probably one of the favorite things I've seen him say in these debates. And he's like, he was like talking to Biden, like, you more than any other candidate have invoked Barack Obama's name. When you do that, you got to take the good with the bad. You can't just, you can't ignore the fundamental. Well, let's be real here as radicals. The Democratic Party ignores a lot of the bad stuff that happens under their presidents, but very specifically here, again, Obama's record on immigration is pretty abysmal. And
Let's also gotta take this in consideration. We gotta think about it. The other issue that you have is the fact that the people who are talking about immigration, I think only 2 of them have actual. 2 out of the 25, 26 have actual pathway to citizen substantive reforms. Yeah. Julio Castro just happens to be one of them. Mm-hmm. I don't like the fact that Julio Castro really can't speak Spanish, but that's a totally different conversation. But
get Duolingo.
Right. Here's the thing. Within the same token, I would have loved for them to have a discussion about what does a real pathway to citizenship looks like. So we turn. Okay, so let's say the Democratic candidate and the Democratic Party, they stopped the illegal family separations. Okay, with executive order. Boom. We're gonna change the border crossing from a misdemeanor to a civil infraction. Mm-hmm. Okay, bam. So we got both of those. What are we gonna do next when it comes to immigration? If I was on that stage, and this is going to sound draconian, this is going to sound crazy, and draconian.
Draconian.
Yeah, draconian. But bear with me with my logic.
All right, I'm preparing myself.
Yeah.
What are you about to say?
The thing is, what I would say, and this is what I would advocate for, is as of right now, there isn't a pathway for citizenship for people who are in asylum, people who are undocumented, who's been living here for years, and we do have a plan for people for DACA students. For everyone else who is in asylum, for people who's been here for years, who had a visa and their visa expired, all those things. My plan, if I was one of those candidates, I would say, look, this is going to be my plan for pathway to citizenship. If you've been here for 5 to 7 years, if you've been here for 5 to 7 years and you've paid your taxes, you haven't committed a felony crime or anything of the sort, or if you've been a productive citizen in the United States, undocumented, you've been in sanctuary, you've been in asylum for 5 to 7 years, you know what? After those 5 to 7 years, you deserve to be an American. You deserve to have all the rights of a citizen. You deserve to become a resident of the United States. I'm like, because, and the reason why I said this, that sounds crazy, is because in the beginning of the American society, that's what we did.
Yeah.
And when it comes to when you go back to how the country was founded, that's literally what America did. They said if you lived here for 7 years, you paid your taxes, all that, you become an American citizen.
Yeah.
If I was a presidential candidate, I'd be like, instead of that being 7 years, we're gonna make that 5. We're gonna make it 3 to 5 for everyone who's undocumented, who's for everybody who's in asylum or who's in sanctuary, or for anybody whose family's been here and they've been working, they've been productive citizens of the United States. I would say that's my pathway to citizenship. Please, someone give me a better alternative.
Yeah, and I'd say, I mean, that reminds me, like, historically, thinking historical perspective, immigration has really only been a quote-unquote political issue for the last, less than 100 years. There's actually very interesting history about Mexican immigration and how, like, dog whistle racism led to the prohibition of marijuana. I won't go into all that right now.
That is facts.
But, I will say, my only thing with that, obviously, I would say, like, eventually something a little more radical. I've talked on the show about how I support open borders, but one last little thing, I think, before we go to break. One of the things that I really appreciate that Castro talked about that most of the other candidates didn't was a Marshall Plan for Latin America. Because, honestly, I feel like the whole thing with immigration, like, the only reason most of those refugees are coming up to America to begin with is because of the history of American interventionism, imperialism, and capitalism. And, you don't have to look that far back. Last year it was in the news about the Honduran refugees, and that was the result of an American foreign policy decision that happened, like, just 10 years ago during the Obama years. It was a coup that happened that Secretary Clinton helped facilitate that led to the conditions in Honduras that are forcing them to seek asylum.
But I mean, that also go back to the war on drugs. That combines with the tragedy in Central America that we play a part of. But that also goes to climate change. There was a number of stories that came out this week of cities of countries and cities, not just here in America but all over the globe, that are running out of water.
Yeah.
That are like there's places in LA, places all over the country, but there's also places overseas in India and Africa, and also in some Central America countries. So you're going to see mass migration. And that also should have been a part of that conversation when it comes to immigration, because we're going to get more people here if you like it or not.
Yeah, especially Michigan. Michigan.
And the other part of it is we're also going to get the other part of it is we already know that that cheap labor or those people who come here, a lot of people that come here that are immigrants are not coming from the border at the south. They're flying over in planes. So like that also has to be a part of that conversation. People who stay here because of their green cards, they expired green cards. The fact that you have somebody like Ilhan Omar, who grew up a refugee and then became a congressperson, who's lives here in this country and has been an American citizen longer than the president's current wife.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And but we're looking at stuff like who's more American, like, but we're not talking about a pathway to citizenship in the most logical way possible. Like, I gave out a logical way that's historically accurate for our times, but it's updated instead of 7 years being 3 to 5. But at the same time, we have to get more comfortable with the idea that, yes, our resources like water are being used up. That's going to force migration to our country and force migration to other parts of the world. And we have to be okay with that. And we got to get comfortable with it.
That's absolutely right. And I think on that, let's go ahead and take a little bit of a break. Come back, we'll be switching gears. Not exactly sure to what yet, but keep your dial locked. We got more on the way. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, your only source for political revolution.
Hi, this is DJ T, and you're listening to 89.1 FM WIDR Kalamazoo, Radio Evolution.
Not be apparent, but hunger is a rather prominent issue amongst the student body of Western. The Invisible Need Project is a multifaceted initiative that's aimed to help struggling students. Every 2 weeks, generous people donate their food to the pantry located in their Fawn Student Service buildings or other drop-off locations. All you need to do is grab a reusable bag and grab whatever food you need to help sustain yourself. If anyone's unsure when their next meal will be, or if you have a little extra food you'd be willing to donate, the food pantry is your place. If you're looking to help donate, become a volunteer, or just learn more, call 269-387-4742 or email dosa-inp@wmich.edu for details.
Hello, everyone. We are back. That laughter. I'll tell my little joke again. There's been some discussion about how apparently all of these white supremacist mass shootings are because of video games. And I just want to say, the 1990s called. They want their empty political talking point back.
Basically.
Yeah.
Young DeMarco.
Yeah.
Bang, bang. But the thing is that... Okay, so for those who not know, or those that haven't been paying attention to the news, our country has basically a mass shooting every 25 hours.
Roundabout.
And within the last week or so, there was 4 to 5. Two of them got national news. But there was literally 5 within 5 to 6 within the last 5-6 days. So we literally just had a mass shooting or a shooting incident in America. Literally one. It was literally like one every 6 days. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was one. It was one for the last 6 days, or something along those lines. There was the shooting at the Garlic Festival in California. There was a shooting that happened in Chicago. There was a shooting that happened in Mississippi, in Alabama earlier that day. There was also a shooting. And then you had the 2 national ones, where you had the one that happened in Dalton, you had the one that happened in El Paso. Mm-hmm. In El Paso. So we have talked about on this show guns and gun violence and what we should do about it. You are a social advocate for the left being armed.
Yep. And you know, I think it's important for me to kind of, you know, I like to explain this too. You know, do I like guns? Like, do I fetishize them the way that a lot of people on the right do? No, I don't. I own firearms, and you know, kind of a big focus of, you know, organizing, like, you know, Socialist Rifle Association, Redneck Revolt. It's not that we're trying. Yeah, it's not that the objective is, oh, we need to have a parallel gun culture to the right. No, because that culture, it's very toxic. There's actually, I would recommend everybody check out this video. Abby Martin interviewed Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz about white nationalism and gun violence, and it's she, you know, Roxanne, she talks about how, like, when the iconography of your country, when like a gun is a national symbol, what does that say about like the pathology and psychology of your nation? Just to kind of cap it off, as far as like the leftist gun culture goes, it's really focused on some very pragmatic facts. I think people should if you are capable of it, own one, know how to use it. Particularly the times that we are living in, when we are really seeing the rise of encroaching fascism, and let's be frank, 18 years, or we got 18 months for a political solution to climate change. There's only one solution after that, and it ain't gonna be nice.
Right. Like, Doc, again, I'm for people knowing how to use weapons and knowing understanding how to use weapons, how to disarm people, all that stuff, learning how to the art of self-defense, what I'm saying, self-preservation I'm all for that. At the same time, I also understand that I look at it from the perspective of, since we are at a time right now that we're still in a very problematic position of people getting milkshake and stuff like that as a form of civil disobedience and protest. I get that. Since we are still here, I'm saying that before we get to more people getting armed, which will only make gun manufacturers more money.
That's true. And the gun manufacturers are all reactionary.
Yeah. So instead of the left being reactionaries and getting weapons too, which will only cause us to be in a much more deeper sea of guns, then what we should do is strategize better to fight our political foes better politically on this issue, because gun owners, and this is the fact that gets drowned out, overwhelming majority of gun owners support comprehensive gun reform. There's and it doesn't look. You can look at any polling. There was I think it was Harvard Harris or some other poll that came up. Overwhelming majority of gun owners believe in background checks, waiting periods. They believe in lowering high capacity magazines. They believe in not selling armor piercing rounds. They believe in a good portion of them also agree with the assault weapons ban. So it's like, right. So there is precedent. It does not matter. It doesn't matter what you are looking at when it comes to the reforms that we talk about. The majority of Americans, especially gun owners, are on our side. So, and that's what we always have to come at it from. Now, Murder Mitch, Moscow Mitch, whichever you want to call him, because he's holding up progress.
I love it when boomers call like the most far right reactionary people like commies. It's so funny.
No, the thing is,
read a book.
No. There's a reason why he was called Moscow Mitch. And for those who do not know,
I know the context.
Yeah. I was about to say.
Tell it to the folks at home.
Okay, for the folks that don't know why he's called Moscow Mitch, Mitch McConnell advocated for the sanctions to be lifted off of Russian oligarchs that we put a sanction on and a ban on. He advocated for us to lift that ban. Those Russian oligarchs now are building factories in Mitch McConnell's hometown and giving him campaign contributions for doing so. So he's literally taking money from Russian oligarchs.
Oh man.
So he is known. So he's now Moscow Mitch because he's not listening to his constituents. He's listening to the donors, and the donors just happen to be Russian.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? But anyway, but also, and this is the other issue that when we're talking about going back to guns, Congress passed a background check waiting period bill. It goes from from a background check, and you have to have a 10-day waiting period. For those that has read anything when it comes to psychology, especially when it comes to suicides, because suicides, a large majority of gun deaths in this country is suicides. They say within the first 72 hours is the most crucial time for people who are having suicidal thoughts, right? And we can literally save lives in America if we went from that federal gun buying period going from 3 days to 10 days. Because a lot of those people in those 72 hours, if they're not going to do it, then they don't do it. Like, and that was it. I think one of the other studies was 9 out of 10 times when people do try to commit suicide, it's unsuccessful, and they're less likely to do it again. They are less likely to do it again if they have attempted it before. The problem is when you give that person a gun, it's not 90% of the time that they're going to be successful. They're usually successful on the first try. So we can literally save thousands of lives in this country if we were to have a waiting period when it comes to buying guns.
That's true.
Here's the problem. Moscow Mitch won't bring up that bill to a vote in the Senate.
Yep.
So he went from being Moscow Mitch to Murder Mitch, and he literally called himself, a few days ago, he called himself the Grim Reaper. Literally, he called himself the Grim Reaper.
Yeah, that's
so
great.
Yeah.
I think that's actually a good segue. There's some statewide legislation that addresses this. I actually wanted to talk about it for a sec because it really speaks to a lot of these issues. But this is from MLive. Headline: Governor Whitmer, Democratic leaders push extreme risk gun bills after national shootings. Let's go ahead and get right into the meat of it. So this is from Wittenberg. Oh, yeah, Robert Wittenberg. He's a Democrat from Huntington Woods. He says, this is a pressing concern. I don't ever want to get to the point where something happens in Michigan and after the fact we say, what could we have done? His proposal would let immediate family members, current and former spouses or partners, roommates, and law enforcement could ask a judge for an order to temporarily take possession of a person's firearms and prevent them from buying new ones. MLive asked Governor Gretchen Whitmer and each of the four legislative leaders, that's Lee Chatfield, Republican, Christine Gregg, Democrats, Senate Majority Leader Mike Shirkey, Clark Lake, Republican, Senate Minority Leader Jim Ananich, what they were doing to prevent a mass shooting here in Michigan. You find the article. They can get their responses. Want to go down and read just a little bit more. According to the Giffords Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence, a national policy organization, 17 states and Washington, D.C. have enacted extreme risk protection orders. Ananich goes on to say, we know that one bill or one idea will not solve the serious gun violence problem in our nation, but we must be willing to take the first steps toward making our country safe. Lawmakers can start where Americans have indicated that we have common ground. And this is kind of what you were talking about, Lawrence. Like mandatory universal background checks, keeping weapons out of the hands of convicted abusers, and establishing extreme risk protection orders. The Senate Democrats have authored bills to address areas of common concern, and we hope that others from across the aisle will join us too. Leaders of every stripe need to have the political courage to say enough is enough and finally do something about it. And it goes on to say, while the bill was top of mind for Democratic leaders after recent national shootings, it's failed to gain public support from Republican lawmakers.
Here's the thing. The reason why it's failed to get support from Republican lawmakers is because a lot of Republicans get money from the NRA and weapons manufacturers. So NRA and weapons manufacturers donate a lot of money to these Republican politicians, so they literally have blood in their hands. I wanted to throw this out here. This is the Republicans' fault. And I'm going to say this here, and if you're a Republican, I'm arguing on your premise
And thanks for listening to the show, by the way.
Yeah, no. If you're a Republican and you hear this, I want you to understand this on your premise. On your premise. Because the number one thing that Republicans talk about, outside the dumb ass idea of guns, or that video games are a problem for gun mass shootings, is that it's a mental health issue. Okay. Your president, the Republican president, through executive order, rolled back Obama-era regulations. There was a few of them. One, he rolled back many of them. One of them cut back funding for mental health facilities and also mental health hospitals. The type of organizations that would help people who are ill enough to want to do these things. Furthermore, your president and the Republican Party as a whole also help advocate and push through legislation so that people who are so mentally inept that they are not able to pay their own bills are allowed to buy weaponry. So on your own premise, from the Republican point of view, your president is making the situation worse.
Yeah, well, I mean, that would require logical consistency, Lawrence, and you can't really find that with the right wing these days. But, I completely agree. I think, kind of getting the weeds here, but this is something I've been seeing a lot online with people I've been talking about. There is, I think part of it, too, is the right wing is using mental health as a scapegoat to distract people from, the real root problem that we have with these mass shootings in particular is the rise of white supremacist terrorism. And not to say that there isn't a concern about, some mentally ill people in gun violence, although most of the time when you're talking about gun violence and people with mental health conditions, it's more of a suicide risk than a mass shooting risk.
But also from that perspective, and this is the reason why I still say it's the Republicans' fault. The Republican Party who are voting and creating laws, it's still their fault. Why? Not because there wasn't mass shootings during President Obama or George Bush or Bill Clinton's era, because there were. Democrats want to pass bills to help fix the problem. Like the bill that Gretchen Whitmore we were just talking about with Gretchen Whitmore. Like the bill that Congress passed earlier this year, which was the background check and 10-day waiting period bill. Who's the ones that's blocking the bill and won't let it and won't even let it speak of it so it can have a vote in the Senate? The Republican Party and Mitch McConnell. Why? Because they take money from the NRA and weapon manufacturer lobbyists. That's so right. Again, there's a party there's a party that wants to make sure that that weaponry does not get into the hands of the nutcases and the white supremacists that kill our people, that kill Americans, our people. There's a party who doesn't care and who's literally blocking progress.
Yep, and I think this would be a good point. Oh, by the way, just real quick, our reps here, I don't know for certain, but I'm pretty sure they both support this. That'd be John Hoadley and Sean McCann. They both of their campaign platforms and their records serving indicate that they support this bill. I also wanted to talk a little bit about like how gun violence in America looks in the global context. And this is from a headline. This is another MLive article. Foreign countries warn citizens about traveling to U.S. cities like Detroit due to mass shootings, which, again, we were talking about, like, why Detroit specifically? I know it's an American city, but so let's read a little bit from this, and then we'll unpack it a bit. So
that's a little bit racist.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. Brandon, this is by Brandon Champion. Multiple foreign countries are warning their citizens about traveling to select U.S. cities in the wake of two separate mass shootings that left 31 people dead and many more injured. In a news release, the Venezuelan government said its citizens should, quote-unquote, postpone their travel or take precautions given the proliferation of acts of hatred and crimes of indiscriminate hatred expressed last weekend in the towns of El Paso, Texas, and Dayton, Ohio. Specifically, the government is urging Venezuelans to avoid cities that have the most violence, citing a 2019 Forbes article. Those cities include Cleveland, Detroit, Baltimore, St. Louis, Oakland, Memphis, Birmingham, Atlanta, and Buffalo. Uruguay issued a similar release warning citizens about growing indiscriminate violence and the indiscriminate possession of firearms by the population. The Japanese consulate in Detroit published an alert Sunday that said Japanese citizens should be aware of potential for gunfire everywhere in the U.S., which they described as a quote-unquote gun society. So, yeah, I don't know if you want to start out with some thoughts.
Okay, here's the thing. Are those cities more violent? Do they have a lot of violence when it comes to like shootings and things of that nature? Okay, you can make that argument. You can make that argument. Here's the problem. The FBI director earlier this year, in front of a committee, said that the number one basically said that the biggest threat to Americans when it comes to domestic terrorism and gun violence are white right-wing mass shooters. Those white right-wing mass shooters, I don't think live in those towns. I don't think they live in those towns. But you're more likely to get shot and killed in a mass shooting by an angry white dude. But those angry right-wing people are not going to be living in Baltimore and in Detroit and in Chicago. Like those right-wing people are not living in those areas. So I think that's a little bit messed up. But I mean, I understand about the violence aspect of single shootings or things of that nature, like acts of violence. Okay, I get that. But like the FBI director said that the biggest threat is right white ringers. So to quote Trump, we need to have a shutdown of white people in the country until we can figure out what's going on.
Oh yeah. So I'd say I'm most amenable to the Japanese Detroit consul who really hit the nail on the head, talking about America having a gun culture. Venezuela disappointed me because it's like, they're right. Yeah, there's proliferation of violence and indiscriminate hatred, and I think they kind of understanding like white supremacy is the root, but then like like gun violence in the inner city and mass shootings are two extremely different issues.
Oh yeah,
it feels like you're not doing a very good analysis of American gun violence if you're just going to lump those two things together.
Oh, I mean you're not, and especially that also brings me to two other stories that I wanted to talk about. Fox News crying about President Obama condemning white supremacy and hatred, and then they were equating him condemning white supremacy and hatred and the gun violence and mass murders to him condemning Donald Trump, and them crying about President Obama condemning Donald Trump. And I'm like, are you kidding me? That dude said that the president of the United States wasn't an American citizen. Like, you're crying about President Obama condemning white supremacy and hatred, and also the New York Times saying Donald Trump is advocating for unity. Like, what? That's your headline?
Oh,
your headline is Donald Trump is advocating for unity? What?
You gotta be the most gullible human being on the planet. It's like one day it's like, send them back, beat them up, we're getting invaded by vermin, The next day it's like, we have to have a very serious talk about white supremacy. It felt like he was like reading off a note card. It's like, white supremacy is bad. I'm sorry, that's my McDonald's order.
No, the thing is that I remember watching the Young Turks in 2006 when Cenk Uygur went ballistic, and he was snapping on the USA Times for regurgitating talking points, because most Americans are not like us. We are political junkies. We eat and live this thing, and we analyze news and news media, and we understand nuance. Headlines do not give you nuance. No. And most Americans, they're going to read the headline, maybe one or two paragraphs, and they're not going to read the rest of the article to get said information. This is how most Americans are, because they have to provide. This is a problem. When you give a headline like that, just like how in 2006 when it said, United States safer, Bush says. This was in 2006. United States safer, Bush says. Based on what?
Yeah.
Based on what? Yeah. That's your headline? Yeah. And the headline from the New York Times was Donald Trump advocates for unity. Based on what? Are you basing it on him at a rally laughing when a person said we should shoot immigrants? Yeah. Are you basing it when he said that Mexicans are rapists and murderers? Are you basing it on when Tucker Carlson and Ben Shapiro and the president said that foreigners that they're invading and infesting our country? When did he advocate for unity?
I think like the real headline should say President Trump says things that are not awful and terrible for 30 seconds.
Basically, yeah. Dog, that would have been a better headline. But here's the thing: the mainstream media in New York Times, they kowtow to power because think about it like this:
normalizing fascism or proto-fascism or whatever.
It's not just normalizing fascism. They are lapdogs to the powerful. Because think about it. Mm-hmm. Equal opportunity. They could have said Nancy Pelosi's not progressive and Nancy Pelosi is standing in the way of progress. And why is Nancy Pelosi? Nancy Pelosi is fights the progressives and fights the squad more than she fights Donald Trump. If they would have said that, the Democratic Party would jump down their throats.
Yeah.
The Democratic Party would cry and whine. They would fight the New York Times saying, how dare you say this about us? We are the establishment. You work for us. You will tell them what we tell you to say. That's basically what the New York Times did. And they've been doing that for years. This is the same New York Times that called Ben Shapiro the thinking man's intellectual, when Ben Shapiro is a fast-talking Rush Limbaugh. Like, no, dog. It is with all intents and purposes, for all the non-language that I'm using today.
I was having some problems with that earlier. My tongue was getting tied.
With all intents and purposes, it is as Dr. Cornel West said. You see how people are. They are uniquely adjusted to injustice, and when they are profiting off of said injustice, they are comfortable with it. That's what it is, man. That's what it is, man.
Yeah. Oof. That is 100%.
And no, also I wanted to get to the doxing story because I thought that was an interesting thing that we could talk about.
Let's talk about this.
I actually got a dip. Got to dip out, and I know you got to take a break, so we got to take a break.
Actually, you know what? All I have to do right now, our schedule changed a little bit.
Oh.
I have to say a couple of words. You are listening to 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution. Now, go ahead.
All right, I gotta. I gotta dip out in a few. Okay. But okay, so this story I personally want to talk about. So Julio Castro has a brother. He has a twin brother. I forgot his brother's name, but his last name's Castro. Isn't
it like Julian and Julio?
Yeah, I think it's Julian and Julio. I think it is. So after the mass shooting in El Paso, his brother, who is his campaign manager, made a tweet, and he tweeted about the businesses in El Paso that supports Donald Trump. all of mainstream media crapped the bed. They crapped themselves, and they were all being mad at Julius. And it's like, no, Julius did the right thing. This is free market capitalism, and it's public record. It's a public record that all of these different businesses, barbecue joints, and all these other places supported Donald Trump. They gave money to Donald Trump in Texas. Well, a lot of mainstream media got very upset with him, and they said that they are doxing him. Now, for those who don't know what doxing is when you, a public figure, puts out private information about another public figure to then get people that usually supports you to send them very, very mean-spirited and other words threatening information, basically putting your livelihood in jeopardy. This is the problem. The right wing is cool with doxing. The right wing is cool with doxing because they do it all the time. Like, literally do it all the time.
And Donald Trump... Their form of doxing, too, is like, oh, you wrote a feminist article? Well, we're going to show up to your house in the middle of the night on your front porch with a bunch of assault rifles.
Right. The Proud Boys has done it multiple times. Our current president did it to Lindsey Graham. He gave out Lindsey Graham's phone number at a rally. At a rally. That's doxing.
Yes.
But telling your constituents that you represent in Texas, ayo, all these businesses in Texas, they gave money to Trump. It's touching the third rail in politics, and the reason why it's touching the third rail in politics is because you don't go after the donors.
Yeah, that's right.
After the donors, and as soon as he went after the donors, it was all mainstream media, and I also bet it's gonna be also Nancy Pelosi and some of them as well going after him, which I think is abysmal.
Before you go, just like one last little point on that, it reminds me a lot of something. A couple years ago, Kalamazoo for Justice tried to kind of do a boycott against Mary Balkema, the businesses that are owned or affiliated with her and her family. There was a pretty long list. Like Best Away Disposal. There's a reason I don't go to O'Duffy's that much. It's like I'm not trying to drag these places, but it's important to know like who's giving material support to. And again, we've talked about Mary on the show. Let me just real quick summary. Most of the politicians in Kalamazoo and Kalamazoo County are either progressive, liberal, or even the few Republicans we have are pretty moderate. Mary is the one exception. She is a super capitalist, and she takes selfies with fascists. So, Joe Arpaio specifically.
She needs to go. She needs to go. She needs to get out of here. And we need to continue.
But it would be like if Best Way Disposal or Mary like hit us up. You just doxed us for telling this publicly available information.
And I'm glad you said that because that goes back to my main point. One, it's public information. If you didn't want the world to know that you support a proto-fascist, you shouldn't have been. It was your choice to give money to him. It's our choice if we want to support, if we want to go to your business or not. That's the first thing. Second thing. They're not him. He did not say that we should not support those. He didn't say that you should not support those businesses. He just said these are the businesses that support Trump. If you're upset that he's showing the fact that you're supporting Trump, then maybe it's not him, it's you. Third thing, OpenSecrets.com and the FCC literally tells Americans every day where their politicians are getting their money from. Are they now doxing sites because they're doing a public service for the American people by telling them what politicians are being bought and paid, who's buying our politicians? No, it is not doxing to tell the truth. Yeah. Doxing is me giving out AOC's address because I don't like AOC. Yeah. That would be doxing. I'm not that, and just support, and just so y'all know, I love the squad. I love AOC. I think she's amazing. I love the squad. I love all of them.
Ilhan's probably my favorite, but
out of all of them, The one and this is my personal opinion, the one that has the most fight in them out of all of them is actually Ayanna Pressley, in my opinion.
Yeah, she doesn't get as much play, but she is on fire.
Because Ayanna snapped back not only at Trump, but she also snapped back at Nancy during their little press conference when they had the thing. But that's a whole nother conversation.
She literally gave a speech to a bunch of like racist white people outside of the detention center. And I'm like, oh, that woman's got some.
She got some brass, bro. She got some brass. But no. Here's the thing, though. But going back to doxing, I need for people to support Julian. We need more politicians to call it out for what it is. It's the corruption. If we don't get money out of politics, if we don't talk about the corruption, then we will be uniquely, again, as Dr. Cornell West said, we will be uniquely adjusted to injustice. And we will be okay. And that's not a comfortable place to be in. And it bothers me. What bothers me the most is not the fact that he said, yo, these are the businesses that supports Trump. The thing that bothered me the most is the cowardice from not only those businesses, but everyone else that responded to it. You're telling me that y'all care more about the businesses giving money to a fascist person than the person, you care more about the person exposing it. You care more about the person who's telling the truth than the businesses who are giving money to this fascist.
That's right.
Like, come on, bro. Come on, bro. Come on, son. Come on, son. Get out here with that garbage, son.
Get out of here.
Yeah. All right, but I gotta dip out.
All right. Thanks for coming on the show, Lawrence. We still got a lot left to go. I might take a quick little break and kind of queue up the next topic. But again, y'all listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, the only source for political revolution. We are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. So let's go pivot to, this is actually some good news. Hooray. This is out of Michigan still. Or not still, but yeah, it's out of Michigan. Yeah. But we've got some good news for our trans folks in the audience listening today. This is from Bridge, Michigan. In quiet decision, Michigan continues Medicaid coverage of gender changes. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer's administration, with little fanfare last month, clarified that sex change surgery and hormone replacement therapy would be covered under the state's Medicaid program. People like Bo Van Solkema, who once had a full beard at the same time as triple D cup breasts, say the procedures can be life-saving. If you can't look the part of how you see yourself, there's a stress that's always there, said Van Solkema, 36 of Grand Rapids, who once sliced Worthless into his thigh and tried to commit suicide when he was 25 years old. Michigan made the change by adding 3 paragraphs to the state's 2,060-page Medicaid Provider Manual, affirming that the state Medicaid program doesn't discriminate and referring to the non-discrimination provision of the 2010 Affordable Care Act. That means comprehensive health care, including prescription drugs and benefits inclusive of sex, gender identification, and sexual orientation, said Bob Wheaton, spokesman for the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. Medical care for patients transitioning from one gender to another will be provided according to the standards set by the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, he said. Michigan's order essentially codifies existing policy, and it comes after at least 7 states, including Ohio, have moved to prohibit Medicaid from covering the procedures, according to the Movement Advancement Project, a Colorado-based LGBTQ advocacy nonprofit. Those states have carved out transgender care through changes in administrative policies and legislative actions, said Logan Casey, the nonprofit's policy researcher. 24 states have no explicit policy about Medicaid and gender transition, leaving transgender patients without assurances that care would be covered, he said. This summer, the Republican-led Iowa legislature banned the use of Medicaid funds for transition-related care after that state's Supreme Court struck down a previous ban on paying for so much care. Iowa Senator Jake Chapman argued that taxpayers shouldn't pay for procedures that may not be medically necessary, especially compared to acute needs such as medications to keep those with type 1 diabetes alive. Can you have someone say, I'm going bald and I have depression, so I should be eligible for hair implants paid for by taxpayers, Chapman said to Bridge. The Republican senator said his constituents generally say the same thing. It's, look, I have no issue with someone having this surgery, but it should be on their dime, not taxpayers, Chapman said. Well, that definitely sounds like some libertarian garbage right there. Anyway, it's very kind of conservative libertarian. There are some good, more kind of open left libertarians with a different way of thinking about this, but nah, it's just gross. Anyway. The ACLU of Iowa has sued, arguing the policy is discriminatory and a matter of life and death, since gender dysphoria, the conflict between one's identity and their physical self, dramatically increases the risk of suicide. Michigan state officials couldn't provide statistics about how many gender reassignment or hormone replacement therapy procedures were covered in the state last year. Goes on to say, the policy was clarified in Michigan with no controversy, but several conservative groups have questioned whether taxpayers should fund the procedures. Anti-discrimination mandates and government-subsidized health care force some workers to take part in care that runs counter to their religious beliefs, said Peter Sprigg, a senior fellow at Family Research Council, a Washington-based fundamentalist nonprofit whose website says homosexual conduct is harmful. Ordinary health care, tending a broken ankle, for example, should be provided on equal terms to everyone, Sprigg told Bridge magazine. Taxpayers shouldn't be paying for surgery that we don't believe is medically necessary. Blah, blah, blah. More conservatives who don't like this stuff. Anyway, It goes on to kind of tell some personal stories. I wanted to mention a little bit here. It goes on to talk a little bit about the context of the kind of violence against trans people. The National Human Rights Campaign has tracked more than 130 cases of violent deaths of transgender people across more than 30 states and nearly 100 cities, including Detroit, since 2013. A transgender individual experiencing gender dysphoria may feel separate from other people or separate from their body. This kind of existential loneliness can feel overwhelming, Schwartz said. Even if the individual doesn't intend to complete suicide, they may have feelings of not wanting to live anymore. But Van Solkema and others say transgender care, including gender reassignment surgeries, doesn't just change lives, it saves them. He says that after a surgeon at Spectrum Health Butterworth Hospital in Grand Rapids removed 6.5 pounds of breast tissue, he looked at himself in the mirror and was able to breathe for the first time as myself. And just a couple of nuts and bolts here. In Michigan, providers and insurers generally require a patient to have a gender dysphoria diagnosis before they will perform extreme medical procedures such as gender reassignment surgery, said Dominic Pallone, executive director of the Michigan Association of Health Plans, which represents the majority of the state's largest insurers. Both Pallone and Dr. Thomas Simmer, medical director for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, the state's largest insurer, said employer-sponsored plans vary in their coverage depending on the way employers design their benefits packages. Pallone said he answered questions from lawmakers in informal conversations, said his association took no policy position except to say that Medicaid plans can't discriminate and pay for whatever is medically necessary and clinically appropriate. So anyway, there's a little bit more in that article, but I just wanted to get most of that very important information out to you, especially the trans folks in the audience listening today. But again, that article in Quiet Decision, Michigan continues Medicaid coverage of gender changes. You can find that on bridgemichigan.com. So I think we'll transition next to a national story. But before that, let's go ahead and take a little break. Y'all are listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo.
What's new and wider for the month of August? Stay tuned to find out.
Don't you wait for something?
Clairo with her new album, Immunity.
I'll still be sinking to the floor. Love is everywhere.
Wilco and their new single, Love is Everywhere.
Love is here everywhere.
The Quiet Temple and their self-titled album.
Wake. I can promise.
Petite Biscuit with their new single, Wide Awake.
But I'll keep fighting.
This has been one of our monthly New to Wider slots. Stay tuned to discover new music each day on Radio Evolution, WIDR Kalamazoo.
To make you feel sad.
Hello, we are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. We're going to give you two more stories, and just be glad I gave you that good one. These next two are a little bit more on the somber side. One is about violence against our LGBTQ brothers, sisters, and non-binary folks, and the other is about the surveillance state. So, buckle up, everybody. But this first article, this was shared to us by Comrade Nora, as was the last one, actually. By the way, big shout out to Nora. She's been super helpful. She's not living in Kalamazoo anymore, but she still helps us find good information and news to talk about on the show, which is particularly helpful because I am personally getting into a lot of crunch time with my outside organizing efforts, so every little bit has been super helpful. Anyway, this is from Out Magazine. It says hate crimes against LGBTQ plus people are the highest in a decade. This is published August 1st and written by Mikkel Street. Hate crimes have risen in the last year, according to a study released by the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism at California State University, San Bernardino. The nonpartisan research and policy institution said that in 2018, hate crimes rose 9% in major U.S. cities that they studied. And this change comes while crime overall in major cities has declined. I definitely cannot think of any reason why that is happening. But, it might be because we have a white nationalist in the White House, but I'm just spitballing. Anyway, getting back to the article. The latest increase in the fifth consecutive increase in hate crimes year over year in the United States. According to the study, the most common victims for hate crimes reported to police in major cities in 2018 were African Americans, Jews, and gays. But whites and Jews experienced the biggest percentage increase. To combat this, 47 states as well as other U.S. territories like the Virgin Islands, D.C., and Puerto Rico all have hate crime laws. That said, of those states, less than 36 apply to LGBTQ plus people specifically, and this is important. This year alone, 12 black trans women have been murdered. Of this number, 10 of the women were killed with a gun. Preliminary numbers for 2019 show increases with the partial data that is available. That said, according to the report, these increases will likely erode by the end of the year. The report also says that for the first time, a slight majority of hate crime victims now report to the police. In the past, victims may not have reported due to fear of rejection and of being ignored, or even out of fear that they themselves may be questioned and in some way accosted by police. While this still continues, there have been some efforts made that allow victims to feel more comfortable in reporting crimes to authorities. I don't know if I'll go into like a deep dive on that. I think it is very true that, we joked, we spent a lot of time back in July talking about and criticizing rainbow capitalism, but there is something to say about the overall positive effect of more marginalized identities being normalized in mainstream culture. It does mean, the capitalist criticism and critique of modern policing still exists, but it does make overall for a better society where LGBTQ plus people feel like they can seek redress or seek help from people who represent the cultural mainstream, i.e. police. Also, I think it is important to understand, this backlash, to do kind of a larger analysis. It's kind of part and parcel of the overall cultural backlash that we've been seeing, and exemplified by Trump. Again, I'm not one of those people who likes to blame Trump for everything. I am no liberal. Certainly, he is as evil, and in some respects less evil than many American presidents historically. Look up Andrew Jackson. Again, one of Trump's heroes. But again, this kind of backlash that is kind of the tip of the spear is President Donald Trump, but it's a backlash towards the more welcoming and accepting society that younger people, millennials, Gen Z, have really been trying to foster and create. And unfortunately, we just have to keep fighting back and ride it out and educate people. Keep educating people. One of the things I talked about in my own personal life with the recent rash of white supremacist shootings, we need to have those conversations. We need to educate, in particular, other white working class people about why this ideology is so toxic, and particularly the young people if you're in your life. I'm telling all y'all out there in radio land, if you got a young white man in your life, sit down and have a talk with them. Have the talk with them. Make sure they're not listening to toxic, incendiary garbage. You never know. They hide this stuff. That PewDiePie or whatever, that stupid YouTuber, he'll make the OK symbol and cute little things like that, quote unquote, cute little things like that, can be a gateway into these much more toxic avenues. Keep in mind, I think most of y'all listening to the show have kind of a, personal experience about how y'all got radicalized. Maybe you started by reading Huffington Post and CNN, then you found Democracy Now!, and then maybe you started reading Marx and blah, blah, blah. That same kind of pathway happens for really toxic white supremacist rhetoric, and you need to watch out for it. Your little cousin or nephew who maybe one day talks about I heard about this thing, white genocide, that's a red flag. That could put them on a pipeline to being one of these kooky white supremacist incel shooters. It can be the people you least expect. So really, just check in with the vulnerable people in your life. All right, so let's go ahead and we're going to close it out with a little article about the surveillance state. And this is funny. Not funny. It's not funny, but I'm just thinking about the song 99 Red Balloons. This 99 surveillance balloons floating in the summer sky, released by the Pentagon. Now they're here, then they're gone. So, that's the general. This is from The Guardian. Pentagon testing mass surveillance balloons across the U.S. Because apparently, a CCTV mass capture of our phone, internet, picture data, the Amazon stick listening to everything we say, apparently that's just not enough. Gotta have some more surveillance. It's like, man, Pentagon, you really think you're not doing it's a little much. You really got server farms, mile-long server farms out in the middle of the country, taking in all of our cell phone and social media data. You really need balloons too. Also, I'm pretty sure that's not good for the environment. So that's just another thing. Way to increase your carbon footprint, U.S. imperialist surveillance state. Anyway, let's talk a little bit. This is what the article says. U.S. military is conducting wide-area surveillance tests across 6 Midwest states using experimental high-altitude balloons. Documents filed with the Federal Communications Commission reveal. Up to 25 unmanned solar-powered balloons are being launched from rural South Dakota and drifting 250 miles through an area spanning portions of Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, and Missouri, before concluding in central Illinois. Traveling in the stratosphere altitudes of up to 65,000 feet, the balloons are intended to provide a persistent surveillance system to locate and deter narcotics trafficking and homeland security threats, according to a filing made on behalf of the Sierra Nevada Corporation, an aerospace and defense company. The balloons are carrying high-tech radars designed to simultaneously track many individual vehicles day or night through any kind of weather. The tests, which may have not previously been reported, received an FCC license to operate from mid-July until September, following similar flights licensed last year. Arthur Holland Mitchell, the co-director of the Center for the Study of the Drone at Bard College in New York, said, "What this new technology proposes is to watch everything at once. Sometimes it's referred to as combat TiVo, because when an event happens somewhere in the surveilled area, You can potentially rewind the tape to see exactly what occurred, and rewind even further to see who was involved and where they came from. The tests have been commissioned by the U.S. Southern Command, which is responsible for disaster response, intelligence operations, and security cooperation in the Caribbean and Central and South America. Southcom is a joint effort by the U.S. Army, Navy, Air Force, and other forces, and one of its key roles is identifying and intercepting drug shipments headed for the United States. We do not think that American cities should be subject to wide area surveillance in which every vehicle could be tracked wherever they go, said Jay Stanley, a senior policy analyst at the American Civil Liberties Union. Even in tests, they're still collecting a lot of data on Americans. Who's driving to the Union House, the church, the mosque, the Alzheimer's clinic, he said. We should not go down the road of allowing this to be used in the United States, and it's disturbing to hear that these tests are being carried out, by the military no less. For many years, Sierra Nevada has supplied Southcom with light aircraft packed with millions of dollars worth of sensors, which then flew over Mexico, Colombia, Panama, and the Caribbean Sea. But planes require expensive crews and can only fly for a few hours at a time. In a report to the Senate Armed Services Committee this February, Southcom's commander, Admiral Craig Fowler, wrote, while improving efficiency, we still only successfully interdicted about 6% of known drug movements in 2018. The new balloons promise a cheap surveillance platform that could follow multiple cars and boats for extended periods. And because winds often travel in different directions at different altitudes, the balloons can usually hover over a given area simply by ascending or descending. Neither Sierra Nevada nor U.S. Southcom responded to requests for comment on the story. However, the rival balloon operator Worldview recently announced that it had carried out multi-week test missions in which its own stratospheric balloons were able to hover over a 5-mile diameter area for 6.5 hours, and larger areas for days at a time. The very nature of these balloons is that they can operate for weeks and months, said Ryan Hartman, the CEO of Worldview. The challenge is how to harness the stratospheric winds to be able to create a persistent station-keeping capability for customers. Raven Aerostar, the company that is supplying the balloons for Southcom's tests and launching them from its facility in South Dakota, told The Guardian that it had balloons remain aloft for nearly a month. Raven also makes balloons for the Alphabet subsidiary Loon, which uses them to help deliver internet and cell phone service from the stratosphere. The FCC documents show the Southcom's balloons are carrying small, satellite-like devices housing sophisticated sensors and communication gear. One of those sensors is a synthetic aperture radar intended to detect every car or boat in motion on a 25-mile swath beneath the balloon. So, again, the article goes in a little bit further depth. There's not too much else to it, but I wanted to let you know that article, if you want to read it for yourself, that's from The Guardian. Pentagon testing mass surveillance balloons across the United States. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and get wrapped up near the end of the show here. Let's talk a little bit about some of the activist and organizer events going on this week. At 9 a.m. Oh, wait, that was today. Never mind. Going on concurrently with the show, Esteban Juarez had his mayoral kickoff campaign. Shout out to that. Tomorrow, over at the Northside Association for Community Development, there's going to be an opportunity fair and community barbecue hosted by the people running the Kalamazoo Promise. Check that out if you can. On Sunday, August 11th, over at Outfront Kalamazoo, from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m., there's going to be a community organizing class. On Monday, August 12th, there's going to be 3 different events going on. The Kalamazoo Socialist Party is having its weekly board meeting. That's over at the Invisible College. That's Monday, August 12th, 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Over at the KNAC, that's the Kalamazoo Nonprofit Advocacy Coalition, from 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m., there's going to be a community-driven storytelling event. And then over at the Vine Neighborhood Association on Monday, August 12th, The Southwest Michigan Democratic Socialists of America are going to be having their August general meeting, and that's going to be from 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. And another candidate event, August 14th, Wednesday at 7 a.m., David Benak is going to be doing his coffee hour event. So anyway, that is going to be it for the show today. Y'all have been listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution. Until next time, keep on fighting for that revolution solution.